Welcome everybody. Item 1.01, welcome you to the Tuesday, June 3rd, 2025 special session of the Bossier Parish School Board meeting. We'll move right into item 2.01, report Student Population Project for Bossier Parish School Board, June 2025, presented by Mike Hefner, Chief Geographic Planning and Demographic Services, LLC. Mike, go ahead.
Thank you very much, members of the board, superintendent. Good seeing all of y'all again this afternoon. Hope all of y'all had a good Memorial Day weekend and a successful conclusion to the school year. I do want to hit some of the highlights of the report. I had a little meeting earlier with staff on this. A few little things that we're going to probably end up tuning up. We'll probably cover some of that here during our discussions. But this PowerPoint just kind of hit the highlights. I want to leave enough time for y'all to ask any specific questions that y'all may have. The time period for this report is a projection of 7 years. Since we're kind of right on the cusp of 2025 starting up, I kind of want to push those numbers out just a little bit. So normally we do a 5-year, I've done 10, this one we're kind of splitting the difference. As with any report, we have certain assumptions that we use. Your enrollments are based on your attendance zones that are in effect. We're assuming that those will remain in effect during these 7 years. We're not going to have any major disaster or man-made event that's going to disrupt things over the next 7 years. No major shift to students to private, parochial, or charter. No future policy changes that are going to drastically affect student choice options or program locations, because your enrollments are dependent upon that. No independent school districts being formed out of the district. The LA Gator program, y'all probably have been hearing about that. That is the state voucher program. Right now, we're not sure what effect that's going to have on public schools around the state. My understanding, the last thing I read, is that they're not expanding the amount of money available for the vouchers, but until that budget's finalized, it's hard to say what that's going to do. But that provides vouchers that parents can use not only for private parochial education, but also for home study and independent schools. So any of those can affect your enrollments. The main thing is that these projections are a guide. They're not meant to be precise. I wish they would be precise down to the student at each grade level for each year. There are so many variables involved, it's very hard to predict exactly that. So we're looking at these mostly as the trends. As we go through that, keep that in mind. We're going to be taking a look at your economic activity. This assumes that your economic activity is going to remain essentially the same. The general population and housing trends remain the same. I did include your pre-K numbers, even though you fund pre-K. That's an optional thing. I wanted you to at least have some numbers to see what the calculation is showing, what you may have as far as pre-K age. You may want to take a look at that on some of your future budgets, whether you want to expand your pre-K offerings at certain schools or not. So those numbers are included in there. I generally take a pretty conservative approach on my projections. Building new schools or expanding schools is a very expensive proposition, so I don't like to give a rosy, blue sky type projection. I try to be more on the conservative side. I don't want to lead a school district into building extra classrooms when it may turn out that they're really not necessary. So keep that in mind as well. We're going to be looking at is your population trends, your economy, your housing characteristics, some of your historical enrollments, because those provide the trends over the last 4 years that I'm using to project out for the next 7 years. And then we're looking at other things like transportation, housing, those kind of things that can, external factors we call them, that can affect your student population, but it's not necessarily something you have control over. So those are, I call them external factors. First one's general population. From your students come from your general population. This is by census tract, these are the changes in population that the parish has experienced between the 2010 census and the 2020 census. The areas in red and orange are areas where they've lost population. The areas on the other side of the spectrum in the blue and purple are the areas that you have gained population. The blue and the purple that you see, particularly with the Benton area on the map on the right-hand side, is probably no surprise to any of y'all here. That is the area that has grown the most in those ensuing 10 years. Kingston, which was led by the Legacy area, had the greatest population. On the next one, we have the Bossier City area. And by the way, the page numbers at the bottom of each of the slides corresponds to the page in the report. So you can kind of see where I've extracted some of that out. Bossier City area. The Bossier City area itself, particularly to the north, experienced some population loss. You had a little population gain down on the south end of of Bossier City itself. The big red area or pink area on that slide there, that's the base. They've shifted some of the base housing off base, so that's why 2010 that base housing was there. Now it's not necessarily there. That's why it shows a population drop. But that census tract is the base. And then if you look to the right on the slide on the right, that's the Houghton area, and you are seeing some growth over there in the Houghton area, which you're seeing some of that in your schools right now. So generally, we've had, the Bossier City has the greatest drop. Eastwood area to the east has had a little bit of a drop. Benton, the town of Benton's had a little bit, but Legacy and Kingston have had the greatest growth. The Legacy area, a plus 86% increase in population. Kingston had a plus 48%. Those are pretty significant changes in population. Let's take a look at your population trends. These are the estimates of the population provided by the Census Bureau in between the two census counts plus going up into 2024. They use different metrics for these numbers. They don't use the voluntary response rate that you get from the census. The census counts are only the counts of people that responded. Those of y'all that were involved in the redistricting and redrawing your election districts, remember our discussion about that. It's only people that responded to the census, so it's not a 100% count. This tries to get close to 100% count. Census Bureau uses a lot of different data points to come up with these estimates. The main takeaway on here is that you are looking to continue to this trend from 117,000 in 2010 to 131,000 as of January of 24. Your overall trend is moving up. I also have in the report with the Census Bureau's looking at long range on your population, and again, it's continuing to go up. So overall, as your general population goes up, so is your student, or the availability of students. Not all of them will go into the public, but you'll have continued growth in your children of student age, or school age, excuse me. In and out migration is one point that we take a look at. We want to see the numbers moving in, the numbers moving out. Bossier Parish has actually had more move out of the parish than move into the parish. And a particular interest is take a look at the adjusted gross income of those moving out versus those moving in. Those moving out had a higher adjusted gross income than those moving in. So that means that you're actually having a little loss in your economic buying power among the general population. But it also indicates, too, that the level of disposable income available for those people moving in isn't as much as maybe the ones that moved out. These stats are from the Internal Revenue Service. They're based on the filings, income tax filings per household, and of course all of those have the number of dependents and whatnot, so they can count the number of people. So the latest data was from 21 to 22. It's not a big difference, 576 persons lost during that year, but it's just the fact that you kind of losing some of greater earning power than those coming in. Let's take a look at your economy, just some highlights on it. For a healthy economy, you need to have a strong labor force. You need to have people available to work. That's what businesses are looking for. If I move there, am I going to have the employee pool to pull from? You're looking very good. Your civilian labor counts are looking really good. They're much higher than they were pre-pandemic. If you take a look at the employed labor counts, they're also holding very, very strong. In March of 2020, right before the lockdown, you had 52,000 that were employed. Now you got 55,000. Good trend. It's looking good. Let's take a look at the other side of that equation, the unemployed labor force. The unemployment labor counts are actually going down. In March of 2020, you had 3,400 pre-lockdown. Now you're down to 2,300. Your unemployment rate has actually dropped a little bit more since. March of 2020, you had a 6.1% unemployment rate. You're down now to a 3.8%. Very positive move. Shows that you have a very strong economy over here in Bossier Parish. That's good because you're not driving people out because of a lack of jobs or anything. If anything, people want to be coming in because of the availability of jobs. So let's take a quick look at what that employment is by industry in the parish. Your number one employer is in education, healthcare, and social services. And that's pretty typical in most parishes. That's a pretty wide net, pretty big net to cover. But that by far is the greatest employer. Then you have retail, trade, and construction, and then some of your categories that have fewer people employed. The chart with the actual data points is also in the report. The other thing we want to take a look at is what is your income? Yeah, go ahead.
Go back to that prior, thank you. Where's Barksdale reflected in these numbers?
In the employment by industry,
Yes.
they didn't break out the military on that, but I can get that the military employment. I can pull that out as a separate category. This is mostly the standard breakout, but since y'all are kind of military centric, it would be no problem finding that number for you.
Significant. I think it would have an impact on whichever area it was included in.
Okay. Yeah, if you take a look at the at your in and out migration, your APO, FPO, a lot of that is your base people. People coming in, people going out. You had 127 households that were coming in versus 89 that went out. That's one indicator, just movement within that that category. But I'll pull together the military stuff. Mr. Newman?
So on page 18, Exhibit 17, Bossier Parish estimated employment by industry, the top line says civilian employed population 16 years and over. So is that safe to say that there are no military in this number?
That's correct. This is civilian labor force. Military they do calculate military, but it's not generally included in these. And also your labor forces on here, these charts, these are civilians.
Yeah, if you can get us that military, that'd be,
Yeah,
that's
that's
pretty
a
significant.
significant payroll. They are, where do we stand now? I know at one time Barksdale, then Willis Knight, and then it was Willis Knight and Barksdale.
I think
but they
Mr.
were
Rowland
right
just
there.
said 15,000 people. That's 25% of these estimated numbers.
Yeah, yeah. That's, I think we're all thinking the same thing.
Yeah, but your military numbers aren't in here. These are just civilian.
Okay.
Now, if they're non-military, they're contractors, what have you, they well could be in these. But if they're actually enlisted military people, they're not going to be these. This is civilian only. But taking the military off to the side, and that's generally what I'm looking at is the overall parish. Outside of the effect of the base itself, you're looking very, very strong. The economy's doing very well. Median household income is doing well. You'll see that big spike started in 2020. My research has been showing a correlation between those increases and the federal pandemic checks that they were sending out for various families and other categories of people. That has since pretty much dropped out. The important note is, though, that your economy here is strong enough so that that hasn't had a negative impact. The fact the government's not funding that stuff anymore, your median household income continues to go up. So it's on a good trajectory. It means that people are doing fairly well with regards to their household income. I mean, you went from 56,000 in 2018 to 71,000 in 2023. That's a pretty significant increase in your median household income. And that's just one data point. You can look at personal income and other things, but household income kind of captures the entire household that your students generally are coming from. So I generally use the MHI for that. Housing is the biggest factor in this whole thing for Bossier Parish. You've had a lot of dynamics in your housing industry over the years. I've done several reports for y'all now, and it's always been one of the biggest factors that has an effect on your schools, particularly since the housing is not evenly distributed across the parish. But just to give you an idea, let's take a look at your housing counts by year. Now, this is for the parish. In 2010, let's take a look at the 2010 estimated, because that's coming from the American Community Survey. You had 47,889. By 2023, it had gone up to 56,000. So that's a pretty healthy increase. Your largest increases, though, were in that 2014 to 2018 range. That's also when you also saw a lot of your, back then, you saw a lot of your student increases in enrollment in some of your schools. The other thing that we take a look at is what's occupied out of those numbers and what the change is from year to year. Now, they didn't have the numbers for 2021 because of COVID issues and data collection with the Census Bureau. So they didn't publish for 21. That's why you see that sharp drop in the chart. But we're looking at the number that are occupied, because if you can have the house, you can have a housing unit, but if it's not occupied, it's not going to have a potential for any students. So we look at that. We also take a look at your vacancy rates. How many houses have been vacant out of the total housing units? And you'll see that it peaked in 2020, and since then it's been coming down on your vacancy rate. So it's showing that more and more of your total housing units are actually being occupied in one form or another. One of the things that has probably had the biggest impact here lately on housing has been the listing price. There's a couple other factors, we'll get to those in a minute. But you'll see, like, for example, on the left side of the chart, in May of 2020, the average listing price for a house in this parish was $248,400. By 2021, the average listing went to $229, stayed about like that to 2022, and then by January of 23, during that 22 year, it jumped significantly to $294,000. That is where you start seeing the effect of supply chain shortages, inflation from some of that, and labor cost. Trying to get people back into the labor force, having to pay them more. That inflationary number is really what started putting the brakes on housing. You had a very active market around COVID time, 2020, 2021, early 22. People were trying to trade up. Interest rates were low, trying to trade up to get a bigger house. I'm having to work remotely now. I need an office at home. The kids are around the house more. I need more room for them. I need a little bit more room for my own sanity. A number of different reasons. But if you look all the way over to, by 2024 in January, 322,000, just using those as little data points. Went down a little by January of 25, but then it starts creeping up a little bit by the time you get to April of this year. That graph below those shows that the general overall trend is up. So it's costing people more to move into a house. So that's going to slow your trade-ups, people moving up from a smaller house or a starter home into a new one. Median days on the market. How strong is your market with regards to people wanting to buy homes? If you see the graph in particular, you see after January of 2021, the number of days on the market dropped significantly because a lot of people were buying into either starter homes or moving up. They were trading up. Since then, though, the number of days, it's oscillated some, but the number of overall days on the market has increased, which means that the market's slowing down a little bit. It's not near as hot as it was back in early 21 when we did your last report. I don't think anybody foresaw some of the issues that the industry went through coming out of the pandemic. I think they saw a strong housing market, figured it was just going to continue. And all of a sudden you have some of these factors coming in from left field that kind of put a damper on things. This was another one right here. This one created what we called lock-ins. People that had homes that they had bought or refinanced around 2021, for example, the interest rate for a 30-year mortgage is under 3%. Okay? It was real easy for people to say, hey, look, I can get a bigger house. The listing prices are reasonable. My mortgage price is reasonable. Let's buy a house. Well, as 22 went on and 23 and 24, your interest rates went up 7% by May of 2024 for a 30-year mortgage. Plus, you had the increased cost of the house. So not only was acquisition cost high, finance cost was high. That put a real big slam, I guess, on the market. And you can see that from the housing demand score on 28. This shows how much in demand your housing was in the parish. Real high demand in 2021 in January, and since then, it's had some peaks and valleys, but since then, the demand has gone down, and it's largely because of those factors. Now, that means a couple of things when I'm working on your projections, okay? The developer will tell you, I have 500 units that I'm permitted for. I'm expecting to build that out in 5 years. Okay, that's what they plan on. But in reality, when you have things that are dragging the market down like this, it could be 6 years, could be 7 years, could be 8 years. So the biggest challenge on this report was trying to find that happy medium between overly optimistic, like, oh, I'm going to have all my houses built and occupied in 5 years, or it might take 7 or 8 or maybe even 10 years for me to finish the entire development, because I'm looking as a developer, increased costs, increased labor, increased financing costs for interim, because I got to finance that, and then for people to buy it. So there's a lot of drag on the market. Will it eventually happen? A lot of the developments we're getting ready to go into? Yeah, but will it happen sooner or later, or somewhere in between? The list here, and Jason Cotton was very helpful on this report. So if there's anything bad with the report, we'll throw him under the bus. But he was very, very helpful, as his predecessor was, trying to identify, by getting with the parish and the municipalities, the various developments that were being permitted. They're already being permitted on the books and whatnot, and also the number of units and where they were located, because where they're located is going to affect that school zone. So I took the data that he provided to me, and I took from the best estimate I could get from the data I was looking at what the estimated first occupancy date was, because that's when I started adding kids to your school coming from those developments. Where you see active, that means that those developments are already underway in some form or fashion, and you already have students coming from them. I took your student database and I geocoded all the student residences so I could see some of these new developments that Jason gave me. I could see you actually have students coming from them. So we're already factoring those in. What we're trying to do is figure out which ones are coming down the road that aren't in your system and aren't factored in. So we have the zones that each of those are located in: high school, middle school, and elementary. The number of units and when we expect them to go. This is where the developments are located. If you remember our population change chart, the biggest growth area was Legacy Kingston, and that's, unfortunately, it's kind of where you see most of your developments showing up there on that map. They're in that area. But you're also seeing more now toward the east, going toward Houghton. Now, most of them still are north of Houghton. There's really not much in the actual like Houghton elementary zone, and that's what the black outlines are your elementary zones. But this gives you an idea of where they're geographically located. And of course, any developer is going to take a look at what your flood zones are. The areas in green are your areas most suitable for development because they're the least likely to flood. The areas in red have some propensity at some varying level to be subjected to episodes of flooding. If you get a real detailed firm map, panel map, you can actually get down to even more detail than this. But this is just a general overview to kind of give you an idea how a developer is going to be looking at the parish as to where can I develop and where can I not. And that's just going to be one of the basic things that they'll take a look at. Yes, sir?
Have you been able to factor in some new roads or an expansion of our road system?
Next page.
That's this slide right here. You jumping right ahead of me again. That's all right.
Road and, what's the bypass, what? Veterans, thank you. That is open to, if you drive it, that is
Not
opened up
lately.
hundreds of acres
Yep.
of undeveloped, but developable properties.
Yeah, and like with Swan Lake Road, the extension, that being put in, that's going to open up quite a bit. The parish has some extensions with Winfield and Wafer and Palmetto and Sligo. That's going to open up some areas. Right now, most of their immediate projects are mostly widenings and overlays. Probably the thing, though, that's probably going to affect some of the development the most is how fast and how extensive they continue expanding sewage district number 1. Because most developers do not want to put in their own water wells and their own sewer plants. They want to rely on municipal supplies. So they may have an area that's prime for development, it's accessible, land's easy to develop, but if it doesn't have municipal water and sewer, they're going to sit on it for a little bit until such time the infrastructure catches up to them. So right now, I'm looking at the parish's master plan on it. They're continuing to expand, but we don't have any firm milestones that we're going to have sewage district number 1 extended from this point out east to that point. But they are working on it. So that is probably one of the main things that's going to drive some of the future development that's not even showing up in those subdivisions right now, is where that water and sewer services go. Probably even more so than some of the roads, the widening and overlays. Yes, sir?
I know there's talk in the parish about the moratorium and all this stuff. So in this is just gonna be everything that's already been approved. Obviously, there's things that could materialize. What all happens with that still up in the air, but this is just based on what we have access to.
This is already on paper, been approved, already gone through the planning process by the controlling jurisdiction.
Mr. McConaughey, to add context to that, I'd already done some research on that. There was a moratorium in North Bossier Parish, but it has been partially lifted and should be fully lifted at the next police jury meeting. Sorry, didn't mean to drop my phone, but that was as of today. Lunch.
Pretty good mic drops over there.
And I understand from staff's discussion today that there may be some restrictions with regards to lot sizes and things like that in the parish area. Is that correct? That's the taunt. So that may affect some of your future development as well as to where it's going to happen within the parish or maybe one of the municipalities coming down the road that may not have those restrictions. So a few things down the road that we have to keep an eye on. But overall, from an external factors, things that you can't control, I think you're actually fairly doing good. Your population's looking good, economy's doing good, income's doing well. Your housing, you continue to develop. I think it's just going to be occupied at a slower rate than what we've seen maybe in the mid, between 2010 and 2018. You're going to see some improvements on arterial. I think the big, again, water and sewer is going to be one of the main things. But overall, I'm not seeing anything that's going to pull students out of your system. If anything, it's going to be propensity to have more students. So let's get into your school profile. Most of y'all are already familiar with it, but somebody that's not, that's reading the report, this is your feeder zone pattern. I have them color-coded by the elementary into the upper, middle, and high school. I keep those colors pretty much throughout the report on the various charts. Let's take a look at your actual enrollments from 21 to 24. You'll see that you've had some variations, but overall, you actually had a 267 student loss in actual enrollment between 2021 and 2024. Not all schools lost students, though. Some gained students, some lost some, but very small. Some had larger losses. It's not even across the board. Some of them, though, that are seeing losses are coming from the older parts of the parish with older neighborhoods, and those neighborhoods are aging out. Families moved in, bought the house, moved in, had kids, sent them to school, kids grew up, they moved out, now they're empty nesters in those neighborhoods and there's no kids. You can go to a neighborhood that maybe you're growing up and there might have been dozens and dozens of kids in the neighborhood, and now there's hardly one to be found. That's because they've aged out. Some neighborhoods, though, will restart that life cycle at some point in time. Some won't. Really depends on location and the quality of the homes themselves, on the structure. But in some of the areas, like in Central Bossier, that's where you're starting to see, and like down Sun City and what have you, you're starting to see some of those older subdivisions starting to age out. These trends, though, what I do is I take a look at it, I do a mathematical calculation, grade to grade, by school, from one year to the next. How many first graders at this school ended up in second grade at that school the following year, and ended up third grade the following year, and fourth grade the following year? And so we do a mathematical calculation of what that change is, that average change, and I take that formula and I apply that moving forward, and then have to, in some cases, we have to adjust that. We may have new housing developments coming in that are going to bring more students in than they historically have had, so that we have to manually adjust those. We do have a couple of, on some schools that I'll probably need to go back and take a look at tuning up the formula, because they're not affected by any housing developments. I just think that that mathematical formula was too aggressive and adding more students than they're probably going to show up. But by and large, the area in pink from 25 to 31 is what the calculations are, or your projections are, for the coming 7 years. The green column to the right shows a comparison to the base year, which is school year 21, and the one in purple shows a comparison between your October enrollment of last year to what we're expecting it to be in October of 31. You have some schools that are going to gain and some schools that are going to lose some population. The net right now, and so this is going to be subject to be tuned up a little bit after my discussions with staff and likely with the board members. Approximately about 1,200, almost 1,300 students increase between now and then. I think, Superintendent, you had calculated like 7,000 new housing units?
I could ask a quick question, and it kind of corresponds to what you're talking about now, but also on the previous. I want to call something out and make sure I fully understand it. And I did some quick math. I'm looking at Exhibit 37, the actual enrollment. If I look at the airline high school, like they net increased 6 students at the high school, but when I add up all the feeders to it, that's a net decrease of almost 250. And I'd open this up to Mr. Rowland and anybody else. How can we have a net decrease in all of our feeders of 250, yet show an increase of overall student count at the high school level? So I'm kind of curious, and I see that trend on some of the others, but not on some, and then that feeds over into your stuff over here. So, are we losing these students? Or are we picking up more in the high school and losing them in elementary? I want to understand that component, because you can't just go by the growth of a high school and say, well, you got to increase everything underneath it, and if everything underneath it is decreasing, well, you can't decrease the high school because it actually increased. So
No, what you have to do is you got to look at it from grade to grade over each of the years, and then apply what that average is, because that's going to vary. You can't just take the total of your feeders and have it add up, because you may have, for example, it's real common to have a large increase at ninth grade. You generally have a positive growth from the number of eighth graders going into high school, because sometimes you'll pull some from out of the system that may be going to a parochial school, home study, but they want to go into high school for sports and other things. So you'll pull kids into the system at ninth grade. But generally, you start looking at from ninth grade on one year to 10th grade the next, you're generally going to have a net loss. And then you're going to have another loss from 10th to 11th the following year. So you got to track it by grade by year, because you'll get some coming in at freshman, and then for whatever reason, you start losing them. They drop out, they get expelled, they don't come back into the system, they move, and particularly in your senior year is usually where you see some of the greatest loss. And that's unfortunately a trend that is all too common, that kids come in and we lose them from grades 10 through 12.
Like if I look at our two eighth grade schools for that feed airline, we lost about 129 students between the two, yet we had a delta of 135 students at airline. So that's, I'm just like, so you're saying we'll have that many students come in the ninth grade and then?
And you lose some. Yeah, it's real common to have kids coming into the high school that weren't in your system before.
Am I wrong? So look, like, right here, Cope lost 68, Green Acres lost 60, lost 129.
Because I was doing the same thing. So like for the Halton district, like I put in all the numbers of just your total net change column for the Halton district. And I showed that it netted basically for the whole district, the overall change from 21 to 24 is positive, what was it, 10 students? You can't look at it like that? Am I?
On your actual enrollments, or are you talking about for your projected enrollments?
I looked at that. I looked at the
Oh,
actual.
you're talking about from
on
all
page
your enrollments?
34. I looked at actual on 34, and I think that's what Eric was saying that he was doing for the airline district. I was just looking at the Halton district with that, just because it was simpler to add that in there. And I showed that for fiscal year 21, 22, 23, 24, with your net change there, that the Halton district actually had a positive gain of 10 students for those years.
But if you break it down on your grade level, on how many from one grade showed up the next grade and what have you, that's where the difference is. Because we apply that and then I total that out for each year. That's what gives me my total.
He's saying they're just
Okay.
ninth grade, like.
Now, your actual is, the total is what your MFP are. But my spreadsheet builds it out on all your grades at every school for every year. And we track from one grade to the next over each year and see how those numbers change. Because it doesn't always stay the same. In fact, seldom does it ever change. You may have 50 in first grade and only 41 show up in second grade at that school. And then you might have 53 in third grade the following year. And so there's a lot of variables that come into play that affect what your actual enrollments would be, which makes it that much more complicated, taking those mathematical projections and applying them going forward. You'll see that in the appendix. You'll see what the totals are by grade, by school, by grade, from one year to the next. You can almost follow it down from like kindergarten. No, but in the appendix should have each of the individual schools. Each of the individual schools broken down by grade, by school year, by feeder. And you can track it. You can track like how many first graders in 21 showed up in second grade in 22 and went to third grade in 33 and so forth. And if you total up the lines The horizontal line, that will give you your totals, but it's going to vary from year to year. If it was real stable, it'd be real easy to calculate, but it's not. And you got a lot of movement in and out, particularly in the elementaries. And some of those numbers will tune up. We were looking in particular at Meadowview. I need to look at those formulas, and also for Kerr, we need to look at some of those numbers. I think they're getting too aggressive in the last 3 to 4 years. We've had probably some things happened in your actual enrollment that might have been an aberration that kind of made a more positive cohort percentage than actually we should be applying. So I'm going to be looking at tuning some of those up. That's one reason I like vetting some of these numbers with staff, because they got a really good feel for things. And so I'll probably will be issuing an addendum to tighten up some of the numbers on a few of these. But the ones that I think are going to be the ones you need to pay attention to, I'm pretty confident with those numbers. And that's on this chart right here on page 37. This is really the meat of it right here.
The actual change.
Oh, the next one, yeah. Okay. I wasn't looking at that, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Okay, so when you have the green there, change
From your base year of 21,
21 to 31? Was that what you projected on the last one?
from the last
On the
report?
last report that we?
No, I'd have to go back and look at that. Because last one was a 5-year report, so it was from 21 through 25 projected, if I remember, 26 projected. I'd have to go back and take a look at it. But what threw all that out was your housing market just evaporated. Everything that we were expecting to be sold and occupied and in your schools didn't show up. Or a few of them showed up, and not as many as we thought. That's all right. This is the area, though, I think that we probably need to that you probably need to use more for your planning purposes than anything. Setting aside the Meadowview, tune-up, and Kerr. I'm sorry? Yes, sir.
Pardon me for interrupting, but
No.
one question that will impact this information. We are in the process of disposing of multiple temporary classrooms, 18 that are on site at schools that you reference here. Do you know if your capacity numbers includes consideration for those temporary classrooms that are now being removed? In one instance, assuming 20, a capacity of 20 students per unit, it'd be 80 just for that one school, which is significant. Do you know if that was included in your projection or if it was excluded?
On the functional capacity, I did not include your temporary classrooms. These are what the design capacity of the school is. Now, we were talking earlier that, there's no set formula for calculating functional capacity. So I rely on the district to provide me with what formula they use. And I think y'all use 80% for, Jason, y'all use 80% for elementary and 70% for high school? For the capacity. That gives you a little bit of fudge factor in there, but we're not including, the numbers that I pulled from did not include temporaries, because that's not in the design of the school. Generally, broad speaking, functional capacity is what the school was designed for as far as the number of students that matches the size of the cafeteria, the size of the library, and the size of the administrative area. So as these schools get bigger and you have to add temporaries and what have you, generally you got to add another shift for lunch, sometimes 2, because the cafeteria can't seat them all right? And your libraries get crowded. And then administration office, you need more administrators, you don't have the space for them, or they got to start subdividing. So that's when you start feeling the pressure of overcapacity on your core facilities, cafeteria, administrative, and library, and restrooms. So this is what you're closest to your design capacity that staff gave to me. So I'm comparing in this chart what the anticipated enrollment's going to be as compared to your capacity to handle that. Now, can there be a little ebb and flow, a little wiggle room? Absolutely. But some of these, Benton High School, you're already over design capacity. Now, you may be accommodating it, but you're already going to be over design capacity.
This is the meat.
This
of
is where it all
whole
comes.
report.
This is where everything.
That's why you're here.
Yeah. Everything that I gave you was global, coming down to this.
This one page. This is it.
Yeah, I would say that Kerr and Meadowview are the outliers, but I would be looking at Legacy, Kingston, and Benton for right now, and probably would have Benton Intermediate on the radar as well. Because you saw all those developments, and I took a very conservative thing. If the housing market improves, rates go down, costs may go down because they're trying to unload some inventory, you may have a spurt of home sales and you may have a spurt of students coming in sooner than what I'm anticipating here. If the market continues slow and other things happen that put a damper on it, it could be longer before they show up. I think this is what I've been working with all this time more so than anything, is the ones that are affected by the developments, to what degree do I believe they're going to be affected and when? Because some of these developments you're not going to see them fully developed in my timeline till 33 to 35. So this is outside my 7-year range, so you'll still be getting some.
Just go, just from pure observation and discussion with the administration at the Benton School, Hart, Legacy, Kingston, we know we are facing some issues.
Yep.
So,
This is no surprise to y'all on the board. It's not a surprise to staff. All this is doing is just giving you an objective third-party view of what the numbers are, and I think they happen to align with what y'all are feeling and seeing out there in the district.
funding source also.
The check to pay for it.
Oh, sure.
That's why we like you.
I'm going to wave my wand. We're going to have a bond issue that's going to...
No, we don't talk about this.
But, yeah, this is, I think those are going to be the schools that you're going to need to be looking at accommodating one way or the other. And there's ways of doing that. And y'all are familiar with many of those ways. This is not y'all first rodeo in dealing with increased number of students. Y'all district has grown a lot since I first started with y'all in 2008. And we actually had Legacy, and it only had like 500 kids.
Like 300 kids, is it just that
That's-
neighborhood aging out and the new?
I think that may be it, but I need to go back and look at that mathematical calculation. I think there's probably an aberration in a couple of the grade levels where they've had a big jump from one year to the next, and that's factored in and then carried through, and that may be overstating what it actually is. So I may need to tone that down. I think the same thing we have with Kerr. And normally I sit down with staff and I go through each of these, but actually the ones I've been struggling with the most have been the ones that are being affected by all these developments. And that's the ones I've really been spending a lot of time trying to tune those growth numbers up. So a couple of them slipped through, and so we're going to take a look at that, and Stockwell and a couple of others. I know mathematical calculations are correct, because I remember going back and checking them, particularly with Kerr, because it was kind of throwing a little red flag for me. But I haven't gone back to actually analyze, okay, in 27, I need to tone that formula down. Instead of a 3% growth, maybe it needs to be a 1% growth at that particular grade level. Those are the kind of things I need to go in and tune up, because that will affect your numbers as they go down the line. Yes, sir.
Expect plain dealing to double in size in 6 years?
That's another one we got to take a look at. I have a feeling that we had some growth in, let's take a look at it, in 279, 271, see, they're pretty flat. So really, those numbers should be relatively flat. And actually, we were looking at an individual one, and actually, when I copied the chart over, it dropped to zeros for ninth grade. So you don't have any ninth graders one year, and 10th grade the following, 11th. So I got to correct that. We caught that earlier today.
The sawmill that was put in, that's the driving force.
It is.
If it continues to grow and they add the additional manufacturing, I guess you'd call it. There's some
The
byproducts.
additional capacity in employment. Yeah, I was aware of that, but up until 24, it's still been relatively flat, and it will have some increase because I would add some increase for that, but not that much.
Now, it'll be for a year, 2 years, and then if there's gonna be a real impact, that's when it starts showing up.
Yeah, I mean, right now they're at, see, I don't think they're going to get to 553. They may level out, I would say, probably around 330, somewhere around there, if that plant comes to fruition and they employ the number of people they're talking about employing. And a lot of times that's usually an optimistic number too. When I talk with the Department of Economic Development, oh yeah, they're coming in, they're going to hire 1,500 people. And you look 2 years later and they've hired 250 people. So that will have a positive impact, but it's not going to have that big a positive impact. So there's some of them that were not affected by developments that I really would like to go back and spend a little time and focus on those and probably tune up those numbers and run them past staff, see if those look realistic, and then I'll send down an addendum to you with that. And in that addendum, I'll put your military breakdown too, and anything else that you want in there. Normally, we have enough time to kind of vet this stuff through staff and whatnot before it comes to y'all, but unfortunately, because my schedule got crazy because I had several court cases come up that required immediate court expert reports that unfortunately the court doesn't care what my schedule is, and that put me way behind. So my apologies. We should have been talking about this back in April, but my apologies for being late and not having the opportunity to vet it, but at least you have the numbers, I think, on the ones that you really need to be looking at doing some planning for. The others will tune up because I want these to be used for planning purposes too at each of the schools. Staffing, idea on your staffing, idea on materials of instruction and those kinds of things. So I like it to have, legs on being able to do other things. But overall, based on what we've calculated so far, 18 schools are projected for an increase. 15 are expected to see a decrease in student enrollment. Again, as I tune up some numbers, those may change a little bit, but the ones that I spent all the time on with the ones with the developments, I don't think you're going to see much change, if any. The other thing that I wanted to bring out, though, is that in the public school environment, we have more competition out there than we used to. 15, 20 years ago, it was basically private, parochial, and then public. Now you got vouchers coming in that people can use for, instead of going to public school, they can use for private, public. You have home study students, which, as you see on the chart on 39, that number is slowly increasing overall. We have more private institutions and private accredited. These are from the Louisiana Department of Education. They haven't been tracking some of these numbers until recently, so I don't have data for private and private accredited for 21-22. But they have been tracking, at least lately, since 2020, 2021, the home study students. Y'all are very fortunate, and y'all have a very strong public school system. We have some parishes I work with don't. And so you got a lot of these type of activities that are poaching students out of them, and they're already suffering declines, and it just exacerbates it. And that's one of my concerns with the LA Gator program, is that somebody can open up brand new pre-K 5 I'm leasing a building, I'll take all your vouchers, I'll teach your kid, we'll teach your kids and all that. And there's probably not going to, by the time the state has any oversight on that, it's probably going to be several years down the road. And if they're not doing the job that they should be doing, they shut them down, and then those kids come in, probably back into the public system, 2 or 3 years behind. That's some of my concerns. New Orleans is a really good example. They had a lot of charter schools coming in after Katrina and all that, and it was years before the state started cracking down on those charter schools that weren't performing. And even when they weren't performing, they still gave them additional years before they finally shut them down. And where the kids go? It's something to keep in mind, and I just like to kind of bring that out, because we're in competition for students. But I can tell you what, we can do a damn good job competing for them, too. So overall, I think you're going to be seeing an overall increase in students. I think the schools that we highlighted in yellow in the Benton area are the ones that you're going to need to focus on. I'm seeing some movement in the Bossier area with, while some neighborhoods are aging out, you're seeing some increase in general population and students, mostly because people moving in are finding that to be an affordable housing opportunities for them. So they're coming in. That's where I think some of the Bossier elementary numbers are coming from. People moving in, they don't have a lot of income, so they're looking for affordable housing, and that area has some affordable housing, more so than it would up in, in the Legacy and Kingston area. It's just a whole different market. So you'll see some, but a large area on the south end, I think you're going to continue to see some aging out. That strong market we talked about with housing in 2020 and 21, that's a whole different ball game now, but we've discussed that. But the end result is these developments that are online, you're going to see these students at some point in time. Whether they're sooner than later, they're going to start showing up. Some that have these public stock exchange developers like D.R. Horton and what have you, a lot of them do their own financing. So it's easier for a lot of people to buy into a home with them financing it than somebody going to the bank and trying to qualify for a bank loan. But then those also have a locked-in market. If they default, it's real easy for them to foreclose, send in a crew with the painters and carpenters, fix it up. 2 weeks later, it's back on the market.
So, based on page 37, just to go back to that. So, we have one school at this moment that's 100 student, or no, I guess it's 60, 50, 51, or something, 40, whatever it is, students over projection, or functional capacity. And then we don't go into any other school until basically your projected 2029, that would be above functional capacity. Is that correct?
On next one over? Which one?
37, which is all the projected enrollments of all the schools.
That one with the yellow?
So basically, we have Benton High School that's above
Yeah.
capacity
Yeah.
this year.
Yep.
And then nothing else goes above functional capacity until 29 projected?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so,
Which gives you some planning time.
so we needed a wing already built at Benton High School. Correct?
Well,
Can we
that
see
will be-
that? I mean, well, I'm just looking at this on page 37, that nothing is above functional capacity until 29 projected, but that Benton High School is already there. And I know when we did the bond proposal and we built the school, we talked about building it to go ahead and have another wing plan to do that. Yeah. So, I mean, that looks like that needs to be the number one priority. I see Mr. Yates is here, so I guess he's here for that reason as well. But what do we need to start on that? We've got some money to do that. And do we have to do all the new things with the shelter and all that
Yeah,
kind of
storm
stuff
shelter.
now? And
Yeah. First of all, I just want to say, Mike, thank you for the hard work. This is really, really good information that gives us a roadmap to navigate and kind of gives us a broad view of where we're headed as a parish, because I know the whole board is concerned about, we don't want to be reactive to growth. We want to try to guide growth if we can. And that's, and most school systems don't do that, but we're not like most school systems. So giving us a peek behind the curtain is very beneficial. I think when we all got the report, like I told you earlier, you kind of affirmed what we were thinking and seeing already, and the densification in that Kingston Legacy area, we want to try to, push some of that out, because it's a lot and it's just too much. So just looking on page 37, as Ms. Smith said, kind of the yellow highlights kind of prioritize things for us: priority 1, priority 2, priority 3, priority 4, in my mind, the way my mind works. And I was kind of going into this, I was thinking, man, we got to build an elementary school right now. We got to build one right now. But you've given us some confidence to take a step back now, and now focus primarily at Benton High School, in my opinion, from what I'm seeing, where we do have a footprint for a wing, and and we can start looking toward that to try to get them above functional capacity. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, I would definitely agree. In fact, I think looking at the numbers, I think this district's done a really good job of planning, especially with all the variables that are in play, especially like with the housing and developments. I think you've done an excellent job on accommodating the growth ahead of time. And what I was pleased to see is that you really have some planning time right now. It's not like you're behind a gun right now. You have time to work through a variety of options before you got to put them in place. So yeah, I would agree. I think you're in a good situation right now. I mean, it could move up a little one way or the other, depends on the housing market, because that's the biggest driver. But overall, I think y'all in pretty good shape.
More questions from the board for Mr. Hefner? Mr. Backhouse, go ahead.
Is this pretty accurate? Isn't this 400 students shy of Houghton? Houghton's 400 students more capable than Benton High School?
Which, you're looking at the chart on page 37?
37.
Yes, sir, he's looking
Right,
at
far right corner.
1491 to 18.
the functional.
Oh, the functional capacity? Houghton High School, I'm showing
We are?
1890, 1457 on the students.
So that big?
Yeah, see, most of your developments in the Houghton area right now on the north side of Houghton.
Yeah.
Now, later, if they start developing on the south end of Houghton, in the actually Houghton Elementary Zone, because right now it has just one tiny little development with maybe 18 houses. All the others are up in the Platte Road Princeton zone. If they start developing a Houghton Elementary, that area, those numbers are going to go up.
He's actually asking about the functional capacity.
Oh, functional capacity?
The layout of the schools of one compared to the other. Does Houghton really have a functional capacity of 400, basically more students?
I'm going to give that over to Mr. Jason.
But you're asking actually the functional capacity?
Coach said
Got it.
it's accurate. So
Yes, sir. That includes the new wing we completed, and it includes the
Added that
demolition
much
of D
space?
wing and the T buildings being removed. So that is the current functional capacity as we
we did
calculated.
that good. That's good.
Thank you.
Hey, 2 lawsuits.
Partridge in a pear tree.
I always defer to the experts. All right. Any other questions? I'll work up on tuning up some numbers, get that and get them out to you. But for right now, I think I'll have some reading material to put you to sleep at night if you have insomnia. That might do a really good job for you. But in the meantime, if y'all have any questions as y'all go through the report, just let me know, either through staff or directly. Drop me an email, what have you. Be more than happy to answer your question, or if you need particular information, like I'll pull up the military information. But anything else, just let me know.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
That moves us to item 3.01. I can entertain a motion for adjournment. I got a motion by Mr. McConaughey, second by Mr. Bachhaus. Please vote. Everybody want to go home? All right, thank you, folks.
Thank y'all.
Thank you, Mr. Richards.